In 2008, a young man in Nanjing, China, started selling wedding dresses online. Nobody noticed. 16 years later, his company was selling more clothes than any fashion retailer on earth. Not Zara, not H&M, not even Amazon's fashion division. A company most people can't even explain how it works. No stores, no storefronts, no department windows. Just a phone, an algorithm, and 7,000 new products every single day. This is the story of how a nameless factory network from China quietly took over the most competitive retail industry in the world, and how the company that invented fast fashion got beaten at its own game.
To understand this story, you need to go back to 1975. In a small town in Spain, a man named Amancio Ortega opened a clothing shop called Zara. His idea was simple, but radical for its time. Most fashion brands designed a collection, manufactured it months in advance, and shipped it to stores. If the trend changed, too bad. The clothes were already made. Ortega did the opposite. He kept factories close to home, watched what customers were buying in real time, and turned new designs around in weeks, not months. It worked. By the 2020s, Zara's parent company, Inditex, was selling close to 40 billion euros a year in clothing, with sales reaching almost 40 billion euros in fiscal year 2025 alone. Zara had over 5,000 stores across more than 200 countries. It was, for decades, the undisputed king of fast fashion. But somewhere in China, a very different kind of company was quietly building something Zara never saw coming. The founder's name was Chris Xu. He started his company in October of 2008 in Nanjing, China, originally selling wedding dresses under a different name. At the time, nobody in fashion paid attention. Wedding dresses were a tiny, boring niche. But Xu wasn't a fashion person. He was a search engine marketer, and that detail matters more than it sounds. Instead of thinking like a designer, he thought like a data scientist. He watched what people searched for online. He watched what they clicked. He watched what they almost bought, but didn't. Then he rebuilt the entire company around one idea. Let the data decide what gets made. The company rebranded. It became Shein, and it stopped thinking like a fashion brand entirely. It started thinking like a technology company that happened to sell clothes. Here's where the story gets interesting. Zara was already fast, 2 to 3 weeks from design to store shelf, compared to an industry average of 6 to 9 months. That was considered a miracle of modern retail. Shein looked at Zara's model and found the flaw. Zara still had to guess. Every new Zara collection was a bet, backed by decades of experience, but still a bet made by human designers. Shein removed the guessing almost entirely. Instead of designing full collections in advance, Shein's system creates hundreds of small test batches, sometimes as few as 100 units of a single item. It puts them online. It watches what sells in real time. And its algorithmic model produces thousands of new items every single day, dwarfing even a giant like Zara. If a design sells out fast, factories scale it up within days. If it flops, Shein simply stops making it. No wasted inventory, no markdown racks, no unsold stock sitting in a warehouse. Zara built its empire on being fast. Shein built its empire on never guessing wrong in the first place. And that difference was about to change the entire industry. Now here's the part almost nobody outside the industry understood at the time. Zara's speed depended on something expensive: real stores. By the mid-2020s, Zara operated over 2,000 stores, and Inditex as a group ran thousands more under other brand names. Every one of those stores needed inventory sitting on shelves, whether it sold or not. Every store needed staff, rent, and utilities in some of the most expensive city centers in the world. Shein had almost none of that. No physical stores at all, just factories, warehouses, and an app. That single difference meant Shein could sell clothes at a fraction of Zara's price and still turn a profit. By 2024, Shein's global sales had climbed to around $38 billion. Estimates for 2025 pushed that figure even higher, with some industry analysts placing full-year revenue somewhere between $56 and $60 billion. Shein wasn't just competing anymore.
Some analysts began calling it the largest fast fashion retailer on the planet by sales, ahead of Inditex itself. The company that had no stores was outselling the company that had thousands of them. Zara's own leadership noticed. Inditex began investing billions into logistics automation, faster shipping, and online expansion, trying to close a gap that seemed to widen every year. But there was a problem. Shein's rise wasn't just about speed and price. It came with a cost that would eventually catch up to it.
Because here's the part of the story Shein didn't want told. Moving this fast, testing this many designs meant Shein needed ideas, constantly. Thousands of them every week. And multiple independent designers began noticing something disturbing. Their original designs, sometimes released just days earlier, were showing up on Shein's website, nearly identical, at a fraction of the price. In 2023, independent designers filed a lawsuit in a California federal court accusing Shein of running what they called an organized, systemic copying operation. It wasn't the only fire Shein had to put out. Regulators in Europe started asking harder questions too. Then, in February of 2026, the story escalated further. The European Union opened a formal investigation into Shein under its Digital Services Act, examining whether the platform was allowing illegal products to be sold and whether its app was intentionally designed to be addictive. Companies found in breach of these rules can face fines of up to 6% of their entire global revenue. Think about that for a second. Not 6% of profit, 6% of everything the company makes worldwide. For a company doing $50 billion a year, that's a fine that could reach into the billions. Shein had built the fastest, cheapest fashion machine in history, but speed like that doesn't come free. It looked like the empire built on no rules was about to meet the rules head-on. So what did Shein do? It didn't slow down. It didn't retreat back into the shadows where it started. Instead, Shein made a decision that surprised almost everyone watching the industry. It went public, or at least it tried to. In July of 2025, Shein privately filed paperwork for a Hong Kong stock market listing after earlier plans for a London listing had stalled. Think about what that decision really meant. A company that grew up entirely in the shadows, avoiding physical stores, avoiding scrutiny, avoiding the traditional rules of retail, was now trying to become a fully transparent, publicly traded company. That's not a small shift. That's a complete reversal of the strategy that built the company in the first place. Why would Shein do that? Because invisibility has a ceiling. You can grow enormous while staying private, but at some point, to keep growing, to keep raising capital, to keep competing on a global scale against giants like Inditex, you need legitimacy. Shein had conquered fast fashion using an algorithm. Now it needed something an algorithm can't manufacture: trust.
So where did all of this leave the two companies? By 2025, the picture was almost the exact opposite of what it looked like in the year 2000. Zara remained hugely profitable, hugely respected, and still growing. Inditex reported sales of close to 40 billion euros for the year, with net income rising 6% to 6.2 billion euros. But its growth had slowed. Zara's own sales grew only about 1% in 2025, its slowest pace in at least a decade outside of the pandemic. Shein, meanwhile, had become something Zara never was, the volume leader of the entire global fast fashion industry, while facing lawsuits, fines, and government investigations across multiple continents. Two very different companies, two very different definitions of winning. Zara won on brand, trust, and staying power. Shein won on speed, scale, and price. And the industry itself changed permanently because of it. Retailers everywhere, from Zara to H&M to brands most people have never heard of, were forced to rebuild their supply chains around one uncomfortable truth. The customer no longer wanted fast. They wanted instant. So what actually happened here? What's the real lesson underneath the numbers? Zara didn't lose because it got slow. Zara was still, by traditional standards, one of the fastest fashion companies ever built. Zara lost ground because it was competing against a company that had removed the human guess from the equation almost entirely. Every store Zara built was also a bet on location, a bet on inventory, a bet on trend timing. Shein removed the bet. It let millions of tiny, real-time purchases decide what got made next. That's the uncomfortable truth at the center of this story. The company that wins in the next era of business isn't always the one with the best products, or the strongest brand, or the deepest history. It's often the one willing to remove itself from the decision-making and let the data decide instead. But that same philosophy, that same willingness to move fast and ask questions later, is exactly what created Shein's biggest weakness. Speed without accountability eventually invites scrutiny. And in the end, both companies are now being forced to answer the same question, just from opposite directions. Zara has to learn how to move faster without losing what makes it trusted. Shein has to learn how to become trusted without losing what makes it fast. Two companies, two different countries, two completely different philosophies of business. One built an empire on stores you can walk into, on decades of craft, on human designers making careful bets. The other built an empire on an algorithm, on ruthless testing, on a factory network most of its own customers have never seen and never asked about. Neither path was free. Zara pays for its trust with slower growth. Shein pays for its speed with lawsuits, investigations, and a reputation it is still trying to build after the fact. The real question this story leaves behind isn't who won, it's this. As algorithms get better at predicting exactly what we want and exactly when we want it, how much are we willing to give up in privacy, in trust, in accountability, just to get it faster and cheaper? Shein didn't just beat Zara at fast fashion. It exposed a question the entire retail world is still trying to answer. And whoever answers it first will build whatever comes after fast fashion.
If you had watched the entire video, you have surely liked the video. You should not miss the next video. Please subscribe and hit the like button.